Connor over here to my right. And below us here in our Schmancy overlay, we have Soundcheck, little Miss Darby Joyce, who's introduce yourself. I'll let you handle that. Who are you?
I ask myself constantly. I am the Game House's beat writer for the Hangzhou Spark, and that's about all I've got. I don't have the interesting contenders team stuff going on. I'm sorry.
You will. Yeah. You'll get there.
Spark is interesting enough. That's a super fascinating team this year. So nothing to be ashamed of.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Okay. So let's start off with our usual segment here. Let's reset our watches. We've had plenty of stuff going on this past week, all three of us. Connor, I'll let you go first here.
All right. So this past week, I've been getting used to doing some social media stuff, which I'm used to from my day job, but not used to in the esports sense. So I've been doing that with Chicken Contendies recently. That's been a lot of fun. But as far as, writing and all that kind of stuff, important stuff, I just finished up an interview with Hexagrams, as you guys might know him, Overwatch League caster. He's been actually casting since the closed beta back in 2015. So he reflected on his story quite a bit, what led him to the Overwatch League. A lot of old casting stories with him and ZP. They go way back, and just kind of gave a really cool story of that journey. And then also just his kind of predictions going into the league next year, and just his kind of work preparing for that. So that was a really cool interview. And then otherwise, just kind of resting and getting ready for the season to start. I know things are going to be crazy, so tried to take a mental health 48 hours and play a lot of Apex Legends and chill out a little bit, because it's going to get crazy here in like 3 days. So that's what I've been up to. But Darby, what about you? What have you been up to?
This past week, I've basically been the Game House's breaking news kid, because I've had a bunch of free time. So I covered the additions to the talent team. I covered the community countdown before that happened. And then I covered the Florida coach changes, which I thought were the most interesting. S&T, awesome guy from last season, is dual rolling as a coach player now, which I thought was interesting. Besides that, I've mostly just also been doing the same, also playing a bunch of Apex Legends, also getting ready for the season. I'm going to the Justice's watch party this weekend, which should be fun.
Oh, nice.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds fun. Oh, dude.
Oh, and I've been transcribing Brandon's really interesting interviews.
Dude, yeah.
Which I won't step on his toes, but
there are a ton, and I greatly appreciate that, because these would take weeks otherwise, which I guess brings it to me and what I've been doing. On Friday, God, it's Monday now? Days. Time is hard. On Friday, went to a little media day special for the Overwatch League, a little preseason action, where they brought out, like 2 or 3 people, maybe like a coach and some players, or a GM and a coach and some players, or whatever. And they just sat them at a table, 5 teams at a time, and said, all you media people have an hour and a half to interview as many of these people as you want. Go nuts. So I spent all day just doing that. You guys saw the first fruit of that labor today in an interview with Uber, Malik, and Zoe, which was awesome, like tons of fun, great dialogue throughout. And then I have interviews with Dallas. There's a Reddit comment that I made about this list in writing. Dallas, which is RCK, AKM, and Arrow. You've got Atlanta, which is Pokpo, Masa, and Sefi, Brad, their head coach. Washington, which was a big one, that was Kate, Mason, their player operations manager, Avala, one of their coaches, and then Stratus and Fozix, 2 of their players. That one was huge, and is going to take me a long time to transcribe, but I'm going to start on it tonight. San Francisco, I interviewed Coach Krusty, Striker, and Sinatra. Chengdu, I interviewed Late Young, their head coach, RUI or Rui, I'm actually not sure, and Gary, who just has the most innocuous gamer tag ever. And then for Houston, I interviewed Flame, Dante, Jake, and Raucus, which was literally 40 minutes of us talking about trash talking. which is the interview that I have wanted to score for a long time. So you guys will see that. I might even break the trash talking segment into its own special about how Overwatch League players trash talk, because the other half of it was them talking about like all the Gucci stuff Ruckus has been buying and the weird like personal arm massagers they buy to prevent repetitive stress injuries and skateboards and Chipotle and like weird outlaws stuff, like standard outlaws stuff, but still kind of weird. Just like as a guy who doesn't buy Gucci, I was felt a little outside on that one. But they were tons of fun. Got to hang out, meet a ton of journalistic peers and stuff, and just have great conversations. So you guys will see all of that this week before the season starts.
That's awesome.
All right.
So Connor, what are we doing today?
Yeah, so as all of our loyal and lovely listeners know, we've been going through the Atlantic and Pacific Division, breaking down the teams, usually 5 at a time, giving great depth and analysis using our beat writers or just what resources we have on hand to analyze these things, which for this episode is Soundcheck, Darby. But because of our Zachary interview last week, which was awesome and just killer incredible, we kind of got off schedule. We missed doing 5 teams. So in light of that, we are going to just tackle the entire, we're in the Pacific Division. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah, that's right. We're doing the entire Pacific Division tonight. So instead of being here for 3 hours, because I mean, I'm sure you guys would love that, but just because we all got stuff to do, we're going to go through, do a quick and dirty, good, bad, and ugly for each team. We'll maybe talk about it a little bit, see where the night goes. But we're going to do something, positive about the team, whether it's roster, coaching, anything, something bad, negative that could be a hindrance toward them, and then just something ugly. Maybe like a meme thing, maybe just something that is really bad. We don't know. Just unfortunate, Peppa Hands kind of stuff. So that's what the night is looking like. So we're going to go through all the teams. It's going to be a marathon. Is everyone out there ready? All right.
I heard a yes.
That's the audible response I was looking for from our virtual viewers there. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so I'm going to start us off with the Chengdu Hunters. We're going alphabetical. The Chengdu Hunters, as you've probably seen, they're on a lot of people's kind of bottom 10th of their power rankings. So, yikes, that'd be what I would call the bad. Is just their skill kind of scaled towards the rest of the league. When you look at just the mechanical skill of their players overall as a flat line, that could be an issue. The good for this team, though, and I actually think this is a good point, is there is some promising young Chinese talent on this team. I think they have assembled a team that, it's not an all-star team by any means, but it is a team that could develop, like we talked about with Paris last week, into a team that's good in a year or two. And I don't think there's any reason to talk, negatively about the way the team was built. I do think there is, merit behind what they're doing. So it'll be interesting to see how this team pans out in the next year or two. They're not going for the title run this year, though, by any means. And the ugly, the visa issues. It was, I forget his name, and
Yang Xiaolong.
That's Yang Xiaolong. I was going to say if I pronounce it, I'll butcher it, but there you go. He is not going to be here for a little bit because of visa issues. I know for stage 1, or at least the first few weeks of stage 1, could be longer. But visa issues are just one of those ugly things that you hate to see for a team. It's no one's fault, I would think. It's just kind of an unfortunate way things work. So that's Chengdu. You guys have any kind of add-on quips to that, or what?
I'm letting you go first. What do you got? If you got anything, Darby.
I don't know. I kind of covered it, honestly, and I'm not going to spoil your interview, but I will say, just from what I've heard from them through that interview, they're very ambitious, and I will give them that. I don't know how much it'll really help, but if they know about where they're sitting in the power rankings right now, they don't care. They're not letting it get them down, and I can appreciate that. I don't know how much it'll help, but I can respect that at least.
At the very least, they have the confidence. I'll give a quick preview to the interview that's going out tomorrow and say that their head coach said, the best present you can give your fans is a win, and we intend to deliver. And that's a line. That is a line and a half. Whether or not that actually happens is a whole different story. But at the very least, Like these guys were saying like, I want to face, New York and London. Like those are the teams that, will give us the best matchups and everything. And I'm confident we're going to win. So regardless of what any of us have been thinking about Chengdu's potential performances, they are thinking something entirely different. So it'll be interesting to see which of us is right. But beyond that, yeah, I think you covered it pretty well. It should be an interesting team.
Yeah.
Okay, who's next? Look at the list.
It should be the Dallas Fuel, I believe, is next.
Yes, indeed it is. The Dallas Fuel.
Who else is going to cover that,
Yeah.
No, that's true. There's nobody better. Let's talk about the Dallas Fuel. We just had Zachary on last week. He was telling us about the jumping jack splash and all the free stuff that he gets now because he's super rich and famous or whatever. But the nitty-gritty of this team definitely interests me, and I think they could be one of the more interesting teams this season. And I'm not just saying that because I am irrevocably biased. They're good. I'll start with their good. Is that they had a really strong showing in Stage 4 off the back of the addition of Coach Arrow and the change in the meta that allowed Mickey to just play Brigitte and smash people in the face all the time. And while the meta is certainly changing a lot right now and focusing on adaptability and flexibility, I think they're pretty well prepared for that. They made a lot of good offseason changes, or at least some reasonable, safe moves. Signing Closer at main support is a definite upgrade. RCK adds depth and competition at off-tank. Zachary adds memes, fairly well-rounded overall, and in a meta that is looking like it'll require a good degree of flexibility and adaptability in hero pools and play styles, Dallas certainly has the depth to kind of make that happen. That said, their bad for me is still their DPS core. I think there are still a couple too many cooks in the kitchen, some overlap that is really just strange and might end up leaving a couple people permabenched when they might not want to be. Of course, I have no idea who. I have no idea what their strategies are looking like map to map, plan to plan, meta to meta. But as it stands, any of these players could end up being overshadowed by any couple other players, depending on how they perform. So looking at that, I kind of get the same feel that I got from San Francisco last season or something. Why are there this many people in this role? Do you really need that many? Maybe. Their strategy could be fit perfectly to that sort of roster that they have. And if so, that's great. And if anybody was going to do that, honestly, I'd trust Arrow to figure it out. But yeah, that's my one shaky spot for Dallas. My ugly for Dallas is that Siegel is still not re-signed. They really need to get on that. Contract negotiations, I know have been rocky, but just give the man whatever he wants, please. Bring him back. Oh God, please.
Yeah. I mean, teams are going out and getting streamers these days. Why not? Why not have Siegel be your streamer? At least have something to do with the brand or an assistant coach or something.
There are actually a couple reasons why he wouldn't be a team affiliated streamer. Just in terms of he's making so much money right now and can play other games besides Overwatch. But God, please, God, I miss him.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's Dallas. They should be pretty good. Their offseason was perfectly safe. They have some momentum coming into the season. They have good roster depth, but they need to make sure that they can use that effectively. Otherwise, they're just going to have a bunch of people who sit on the bench and get unhappy. So, yeah.
Yeah. I'll extend a good to that. I think that, their coaching staff this season, I saw at least in the intro video, they broke down their coaches by position. So Jane's going to be the support coach, those sorts of things, which I think, I always bring up coaching, but I really think that's a good move. I think that'll pan out well. So at least if your players aren't playing each week, at least you're developing them to where, you can scrim them effectively against your starters and get high value out of those scrims. Or if you can get better trade value for them down the line, I think sharpening your bench is a good thing overall. So I think the coaching staff is a really big boon for Dallas this season. Yeah.
Good deal.
Darby, you have anything else in Dallas before you tell us about the Spark or Charge? Ugh.
I've got nothing to add for Dallas.
Okay.
How could I?
I won't say anything. Next up, what do you got for us? It's your turn.
All right. I've got the Guangzhou Charge, which is a team with a special place in my heart because for some reason they follow me on Twitter. but lots of love for them. But they're good for me based solely off of what I've seen during the Pacific Challenge, which I know, Scrimbucks, whatever. But their support line looked great then. I thought Shu, Chara, and Rise all stood out. I think they're all going to be fantastic this season. Rounding it out's Only Wish, who I don't know as much about, but he's got some solid experience under his belt. I think that's going to be great. I think that's going to be a support line to look out for. On the flip side, I think their tank line is their bad. I think it's inflexible, which is going to be a problem considering how heavy tank the meta is right now. They only have the 2 tank specialists. I know some of their DPS could probably flex, but I think counting on Rio and Hatba will probably be a problem. That's no disrespect to either of them. I just think that's all they've got. They're ugly. For me, it's gotta be Kib and Nero's playtime, which I personally don't actually think. I'm not worried about the language barrier as much as some people are when it comes to the charge, just because most of them come from Metabellum. Metabellum teaches its players English, and we already know Coach Jin has already said he's going to bring in English tutors for the charge as well. But I think it'll mostly translate into the beginning of the season where, I don't know, I just think the easiest way to establish comms early on is just to have primarily Korean speaking roster, and I think that's going to translate into us not seeing a lot of Kib and Nero, which will be unfortunate for them. But, yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I think this team for me is one of the most relatively unknown for kind of lighter Overwatch fans in general. So the point about Metabellum is great. It's kind of the melting pot of all the teams right now. It seems like to me they're going for a little bit of like a Philadelphia approach as far as their diversity goes. Philadelphia has made that work with comms. I think we'll have to kind of see if Guangzhou can do it to the same degree, but I think you made a good point. I think their support line is probably their strongest part. I mean, we've seen Kib pop off before, so you could make a case for DPS too, but I really do think this is a support line that could be pretty dangerous, especially in a GOATS-esque meta where supports are really key with their timings and stuff. So, I agree.
I'll say 2 things. I think Kib, I want to hope that Kib will get more playtime than you're thinking. I think he's way too flexible to leave alone. Like, it'll be like Libero. Libero didn't get 100% playtime for NYXL. But they had their moments where they were like, that's our guy. Get him out there. So I think Kib will be like that, especially if they need Wrecking Ball, because he actually showed that pretty well in the World Cup, and I think that was super awesome. So if they end up needing a Hammond specialist, that's probably their guy. On top of his Hangzhou and every other ridiculous hero he can play at a crazy high level because he's Kib. I will also say I didn't get to interview any players or anything from the charge when I was at that media day thing, but I was sitting down with another team a table or 2 over, and I heard all the players on the team coordinatedly say very loudly, so it rang out in the press room, "We are the Guangzhou charge," and it sounded really good. It sounded like people who knew how to speak English pretty well. So I'm going to throw it out there that their whatever tutoring or support services they've been offering have been working, and their progress on the language barrier has been extensive. Because everybody going up to that table was like, "Hey, how's the language barrier?
Yeah.
You ready to not be able to understand each other and suck and stuff?" And then they were probably like, "Yeah, watch this," and then did that, which was a statement in and of itself. It was very impressive. So if that's actually something they can do while they're playing the game, this might be a team that is solving the language barrier problem. That could, of course, just be something they've practiced for days and days and days, so they can just say that one line and then make it look like they know what they're doing. I don't know. But at the very least, they're thinking about it. And that says good things to me on that front, at least. We'll see.
Yeah. But let's see. Next up is I think Darby again. You got the double header here with the Hangzhou Spark.
Yep, absolutely. The Hangzhou Spark, who I could devote an entire hour to, but I won't because You guys
I'm
can
going to throw this
too.
out here before you start. We
Sure.
brought on David a couple weeks ago to talk about Toronto, and we were all kind of down on them, and he convinced us. So this is your shot. Convince
That's
us
true.
here. I'm already pretty high on Hangzhou personally, but like I don't think they're like undisputed top one or anything, like up with NYXL in London. So if you wanted to convince us, now is your chance.
No.
But no pressure.
No, heavens, no, never.
Totally, yeah.
So yeah, we got the Spark. This is a team with big names on it. That's their number one good for me. I know most people are thinking Gushui when I say that, but over in Contenders Korea, we've got Godsby and Bebe, who have both really made names for themselves. Godsby in particular has been considered in the Korean scene as one of the best DPS right now, which I think a lot of people just following the league don't know. They've also got No Smite and IDK, who are both very good in their own right. So honestly, just all around, every single role has a big name in it, has a lot of carry potential. I would also consider the coaching a plus. Most of the players are familiar with at least one of the coaches. They brought in the coaches from X6, 7, and LGD are the 3 coaches for the Spark. So every single one of them has coached at least a couple of players on the team. I think that kind of puts them at an advantage over the other expansions, but we'll see how that translates over. My bad actually would be whether or not they can actually facilitate Gushui. I was talking to Kate about this earlier, just thinking, because the whole Gushui is very aggressive, and that worked really well with Team China because Team China was facilitating that. I'm worried we'll end up with another fraggy situation where you have this aggressive main tank, you don't know how to facilitate it, you don't know how to play around that, so you fall back on No Smite and Rhea, who are already a tank duo from their time in Contenders, and after all the hype surrounding Gushui, it would be heartbreaking if he wound up benched because of that. So I'm really hoping they're considering that. But if they're not, I don't know, it's going to end up leading to some more disorganization, which I would hate to see. They're ugly for me. The language barrier is like, it's always a question when it comes to the whole mixed nationality team. I think the culture barrier is worse. Personally, I think a lot of these mixed nationality teams you've seen, they fall into the trap of trying to sort of coach them separately and then bring it together. I'm kind of worried the Spark ends up doing that with, you've got the Chinese coach, you've got the 2 Chinese players, and that's just happening in sort of a separate realm than the rest of it. I don't think that's ever worked. I don't think it would work with the Spark. So, like, if they want to live up to the hype, which they're a reasonably hyped up expansion team, I'd say they're really only behind the Titans. If they want to live up to that, they need to integrate Gushui and Crystal now. They can't be waiting until halfway through the stage like some teams do. You know what I mean?
I agree. No, yeah. I will say when the Hangzhou came out, the only player they had out there was Gushui. It was him and 2 of the coaches. So at the very least, they're trotting them out for media. They know what the people want to see. Whether or not that's reflected in their actual play remains to be seen. But I agree with what you said that like I don't think you can ignore the fact that you've got 2 of the best Chinese players in the game right now on your team. Even if the rest of them are Koreans, man, you got to figure that out. And yeah, even if if the tank line has synergy, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't build new synergy with a new team that you are constructing right now. So I would definitely agree that like you got to make sure you're using your best weapons, not the most comfortable weapons, perhaps. That development will really take them from just like a reasonably hyped expansion team, and they are quite well hyped, to a team that can actually deliver on said hype.
Yeah, I think the hype is real from the talent team especially. It seemed like that was like a viral thing that went around when all the talent either visited the teams or just saw them scrimming. Everyone was like, "Hangzhou, watch out! They are for real." And this is Scrimbucks kind of stuff. So like that, who knows? But they saw talent there. Hex, in my interview with him, was really high on Godsby as a DPS, and I think he's right. I think he's majorly slept on. So this is definitely one of a scary team to watch. Certainly in contention with the best expansion team to join the league, probably up there with Vancouver. And so yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see. That's a great point about Gushue, though. I had not considered that. Especially, I wasn't super familiar with the fact that their other tanks were a duo previously. So that's super interesting for week 1. It makes me wonder if Gushue will become like a Jake or something, where you're more of an icon for your team and less of a focal point on the roster. So that'll be interesting to keep an eye on for sure.
I just think I want to think that this support line can maintain the resources necessary to manage a tank like that, right? And it's not even that, like, if we're talking about a parallel between Fraggy, it's not that Neptuno and Boombox couldn't handle Fraggy. It's just that sometimes Fraggy made some bad decisions. But if the communication can be maintained well enough that Gukshui can get away with some of those, and if he can just make smarter decisions than Fraggy did, then he could just as well outshine the duo that has pre-existing synergy, which would be entertaining as hell, because you don't expect that to happen. Like, that's a perfectly valid point, that Gukshui could kind of become just a wallflower fixture or someone to trot out for media as like, oh man, remember when he kicked ass in the World Cup, which will last like 2 months, by the way. That won't last. He'll need to keep delivering for them to actually be interested in using him for that. So I don't know. I want to see him start, at least. Let us get a first impression, like truly on stage, running around doing his thing, before we really figure out which duo to go with.
Yeah, it'll either be a Fraggy or a Fissure. There's two ways aggressive main tanks can go in this league. And that's kind of the two directions we go.
Point. Yeah. I will throw out there, because I do love Fraggy.
Yeah.
He's still on the team. Like, he didn't do bad enough to get kicked. And I really hope we see some more Fraggy this season too. So, like, there's that. But yeah, I agree that Fraggy and Fissure have taken very divergent paths for aggressive main tanks. And Gukshui will end up on one side or the other of that, I feel.
Yeah.
All right, who we got next? Scoopy, I think this one's...
Yeah, this is the LA Gladiators, who I am personally very high on. So I'll try and leave some personal bias out of this, but this is a team that in the last 2 stages went 15-5, and then had their playoff run that was pretty good, respectable, and then on top of that have an incredible offseason. So to me, there's a lot of reason to be really high on this team. So I would say the good is kind of all that wrapped into one, especially the offseason. Roar and Decay are just 2 huge pickups, as well as the third Finnish support. So these are all really 3 big pickups for this team. Decay has a possibility to be just a starting DPS for this team, and pair that with Surefour and Agilities, or on some kind of rotation with those 3, and that's just like super scary. So, and I think they're in good hands with Decay coming in as well. With Fissure leaving, I don't think there's going to be any transitionary worries there, so I think they should be fine. I think the bad, last season, I don't think there was communication issues by any means. I know Bishu was doing a lot of translating for the team, and so I don't know if he'll have to continue doing that with Decay or Roar. I personally don't know the capacity that they can speak English, but that could be the only thing I could see. And then on top of that, maybe just integrating new players in, bringing in 3 new players that might see the stage a good bit, just getting that synergy down in like this 3-3 meta that requires a lot of synergy could be that's really searching though, and something that I don't think is really going to be an issue. And then the ugly for this team is the social media, the debates. It happened again today. There was a pen signing thing tweeted, and then they don't know. So there's just all kinds of debates coming out, and they did the same thing with their signing earlier. So come on, guys.
And the thing is too, is that now they're encouraging other people to do it, like the Dogman signing. Don't encourage people to do that. Yeah, I literally I talked with their social media manager after that, and she is just cutthroat. She was just laughing. She's like, "Yep, people suffered, and it was great." So that was a lot of fun. I will say Bishu is still doing his translator duties. That is still a thing that's going on. Uber mentioned it as a pretty significant resource for the Gladiators this season still. So at the very least, they have that, right? Because what Uber was talking about was that this meta will require you to make on-the-fly decisions. If you've got a language barrier, that is almost impossible. because you have to take the time to send it through the channels it needs to go through that everybody can understand. And if you don't understand it, you make mistakes. And if you make mistakes, you lose. So at the very least, the gladiators have the ability to make that decision with just a slight input lag, as opposed to the much bigger and potentially messier one that people with language barriers have. So cool there from the gladiators. But I agree on the, like, you've got some people, some new players, right? How are you going to integrate them effectively? How are you going to make sure that these guys are actually used properly? Kind of like Dallas. A very similar problem, I think.
Yeah, I wonder. That brings up an interesting point. I wonder if that means Bishu will see more playtime because of his translation abilities. Like, not that he's not a talented off tank, but if that alone could serve as a reason to put Bishu in, especially early on when you're establishing that translation, maybe we see more Bishu in stage 1 than we do in stage 4. That could be an interesting thing to keep an eye on, a narrative to watch with the gladiators moving through the season, maybe.
I think if Void didn't see playtime when his long-term teammate Fisher was on the team, I don't know if he sees playtime now that Decay, another Korean tank, but one he has never really played with, is now on the team.
Yeah.
Or Roar, sorry, Decay's the flex.
Yeah.
Names, hard, roles, mixed up.
Okay.
Sorry. But yeah, I'm a little shaky on Void. I don't know where he's going to come in or not, because Bishu is just so valuable, almost a necessity, really, and plays pretty damn well on his own. So yeah, sorry.
No, I was just thinking the same thing. I can't imagine with all that in mind we're going to see a whole lot of Void, which is too bad, but we'll see.
Trade bait.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Mid-season will come very fast for some teams, and they will need something. We'll see.
I also think Bishu could be a great candidate this year for the Internet Hulk Award that Mickey got last year. So keep an eye on that, especially if he does translator duty all year again and keeps doing his awesome positivity stuff. Keep an eye on him for being in that contention, definitely.
Assuming Mickey doesn't win it every year for the next 10 years.
He could, Why not? Why not?
So happy.
Yeah.
Plays the piano and it's not even.
Yep.
All right. So up next, this one's me. We got the LA Valiant, who are a very interesting team, and I've had some very interesting discussions about them. They're one of the teams that I regret not being able to talk to, but they were swarmed at this little media thing. Everybody wanted to talk to them. Like Custa was there, and of course, everybody interviews Custa all the time. So I went and got a couple other teams instead. But that didn't stop other people from talking about the Valiant the whole time. They're a very hot team right now. Not in terms of like necessarily people think they're super strong, because some of these people did not. But everybody wants to talk about them because they're a wild card that should trend high, which means no matter where they end up, they're going to give some teams some trouble, which I think is safe to say. They won stage 4. They still have a good team. Their off season was okay. But even the talent don't know a lot about the Valiant and what they're doing. They don't know how KSF and Izayaki will implement into the play structure. They don't know how Packing 10 will implement into the coaching structure. They don't know if losing soon is a huge deal or not. They don't know if Kareev will be able to handle all the things that he will inevitably be loaded with, or if he'll be loaded with a bunch of stuff at all, depending on KSF and Izayaki. There's a lot of question marks, but there are a lot of solid statements to be had amongst the Valiant. Like their tank line is still probably one of the best in the league, like top 3 in the league. I mean, Custa exists. He's amazing. Their social media is pretty good. Like the Valiant have a lot of good points, but their bad for me is definitely making sure they can figure out which cooks are going in the kitchen and making sure that those cooks actually make something delicious, if we're going to follow that metaphor down the line. The ugly for me is what would happen if that doesn't happen, because we're just going to go back to in and out, and it'll be worse. It'll be worse. If it goes bad, it will go very bad for the Valiant. Like if I think this has been resolved since it happened, but if Agilities was that close to getting benched to the point that they publicized it in what many have now realized was a terrible idea of a video, if he doesn't perform again, he could be gone. Many players on this team could be gone if the Valiant decide that they're not performing at the level they need them to. And they've tasted blood, right? They know they can do well and win championships. So if they don't reach that standard immediately, we could see some benchings, we could see some tradings. And who knows if that'll work or not. It could be great. They could do the next Custa Unco trade and find someone amazing for them and just keep on going if they fail in the first place. But we don't know. So good, still stable, still high quality roster despite their offseason uncertainties and losing Soon, who's amazing. Bad, you got to figure it out and make sure all of that is actually working stably. Ugly, if it doesn't, it's going to get ugly. There's the Valiant.
Yeah, I agree. I think one thing I also love about this team is I think they've created a fan culture that is amongst the most inclusive and just overall powerful in the league. It helps that the arena is near LA and all that, but they've done a great job fostering their fan base, doing meet and greets, stuff like that. So that's definitely a good as far as their reach has been. Whether that'll pay off in on stage, I don't know if that does a whole lot, but definitely a good thing still. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Getting a starting 6 down, this could be like a London stage 2, stage 3 thing. If they don't get everything figured out, they need to get a solid 6 and just get them going. And I think they'll be fine. But if that doesn't happen, you're right. I think it could be, time to get a little worried, start sweating a little bit. So we'll see for the Valiant.
Yeah, honestly, I think the Valiant and the Gladiators, I think what they've got in common right now is it's like for a team as high performing as both of those teams, they still have a lot to prove. Like it's not like New York or London where everyone's thinking, oh, they'll have another great season. Most people think they'll have a great season, but there's a lot of question marks around the Gladiators because they lost Fisher. There's a whole bunch of questions about the Valiant for pretty much every single reason Brandon brought up. So yeah, like you said, it's two teams who have to prove themselves, and they have to do it really early on.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. They've both proven that they can have good seasons with the rosters they've got. But can they have excellent seasons with the rosters they've got? That's the question for both LA teams. Yeah, no, I think that's really well articulated there.
I think, so I'm talking about the San Francisco Shock next, which I think is a perfect transition point for the team just up north on the Bay. I think they also have to prove themselves this year. This is another team that set up, they set up last year for this year, essentially. Took a risk with not being a successful win-loss team last year to develop a team that could win this year. And I think, a lot of people really think they have done that. They have assembled a team with a coaching staff with Krusty. Picking up Stryker from Boston is huge. They certainly have the DPS that no one else can match in the league right now. So that is what I would say is good for San Francisco. They have roster depth that is pretty unmatched. You can say the same at the tank line and in the support line. We could see players that we saw in season 1 get benched. Violet is looking pretty good as a support. So that's going to be interesting. This is a team that has a lot of depth. I think it has a lot of the same problems that the Valiant could have, where they have kind of too many cooks in the kitchen at DPS, maybe almost any position. You could almost throw that out there. I think they'll need to establish a starting 6, maybe a starting 8 or 9 with some rotational players. If they can do that, it's going to be really good, and they're going to win a lot of games. Unfortunately, that kind of leads to the ugly. There's going to be some DPS players that get left out in the dark on this team, and one of them is in a lot of Ateo commercials, and will probably end up working for Ateo at some point, maybe this season. Baby Bay, I don't think if I had to look at this DPS roster and pick anyone who's going to get a lot of playtime, I just don't see it being Baby Bay. I love the guy, and the Freaky Friday parody was hilarious. Lol at that. So, he could maybe be brought on as a streamer for NRG, or maybe he just comes alive and is the player this team needs at Widowmaker or something, hit scan. But rip Baby Bay otherwise. But, overall, the Shock to me is a lot of good. I think the coaching and the depth on this roster are going to carry them really far. And there's, if anything, they're certainly going to have a better year than they did last year. And they should be at the playoffs. If not, it's a disaster, and big changes will be made. And it would have to be a Dallas stage 1 dumpster fire for this team not to be in the playoffs or something. There's a lot of hype here, so we'll see. What do you guys think about San Francisco?
Ladies first.
I think you're absolutely right. I still have so many questions about what's going on with the shock. I could not tell you, I couldn't even give you a ballpark guess of what I think their starting six is going to be. But I think that could actually work for them, because if nobody else knows, then if they figure out how to use that, that could work out for them really well. They could have the unpredictability on their side.
Yeah.
I'd agree. I think people who are a little more on the inside probably have a fairly good idea of who's starting at this point. Even so, as mentioned, there are certainly a lot of cooks in the kitchen. When I sat down with Sinatra and Stryker, they were both, I don't want to say they seemed unsure. I imagine they were really just trying to kind of hold back on me when I was asking, like, who's playing? They were like, man, I don't know. But I think that was mostly them, like, not trying to give anything away. But even so, right, like, DPS already right now is not huge in the meta. So having 5 DPS players right now isn't always going to be super consistent. I will say at least they've got a smarter head on their shoulders with Krusty at the helm than they did with Sephi. Although I love Sephi and I think he did a great job, I think ultimately he didn't really know what to do with all the weapons he had. And I think the roster that he built with Atlanta is much more suited to his abilities as a coach than San Francisco's was. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can overcome. They largely have the same problem now that they did at the start of season 1, but now they have an entirely different person steering the ship. Is that going to be enough to make sure that they don't have the same problems they just had already? You know, and will these players be able to play at a consistent level to make those problems less prevalent than they were? You know, I consider, for instance, either Super or Smurf to be upgrades over Nomi. I consider Violet to be an upgrade over Sleepy. And from what we've heard, Violet is almost certainly starting 99% of all games, and Sleepy is now benched, which is a shame because I like Sleepy. Yeah. But like it seems overall that they've made upgrades at every position while still maintaining the flexibility that they had in season 1, and with a smarter or more well-suited, I should say, to this type of roster coach. With those changes in mind, it's looking like San Francisco can be pretty strong. But if they can't execute on the roster style that they've got, it's going to be an exact repeat of season 1, which is mediocre. And they don't want that. So I'm feeling good about the shock, but we'll see.
Fair enough. All right. I think that leaves just a few teams left. So we've got 3 teams left. I think, Thibble, you've got the next one in the Seoul Dynasty.
Certainly do, and what a team. I'm glad Katrina isn't here to yell at me about all the opinions I'm about to give. She's got them at like 2. She thinks the Seoul Dynasty are going to do very well, and I don't. I really don't. I think, obviously, okay, the offseason moves they made were insane. Fisher is a god, right? Jexy, really good. Marvel, solid backup tank. Michelle exists. He's there. But like, this team overall does not convince me that they can enter consistent, say, top 5 or 6. You know, maybe they'll make playoffs. Like top 8 is not out of the question for Seoul. Absolutely. With Fisher and Zumba, with Jae-hong and Toby, or Jexay and Toby, or whoever, whatever. Like, they've got great potential. But I've also heard that Fisher is being just as much of a personal problem with Seoul as he was with the Gladiators. And if that is the case, no amount of Winston Carey will save them. His Reinhardt is also very good, and we'll probably see a little bit more of that to start, with Goats still being fairly meta. But I mean, if any team is going to give us some tank variant Goats play or tank variant play in general, it will be a team with a guy like Fisher on it. So they will be interesting. That is my good for them. They will be an interesting team with a very high ceiling, but a middling floor. I'm talking between 10 and 15 kind of floor. If things go really bad, it would have to go really bad, because as much as we love to hype the weapons Seoul have, and they do have some weapons, they had the same thing coming into season 1. They had Miro, the main tank god. That sounds familiar. They had Jae-hong. They had Toby, one of the best main supports in the game. Sounds familiar. They had Fleta. No, he's still there.
Yep.
Like, a lot of things are still the same for the dynasty. They've made some coaching changes too. They frankly have completely overhauled their coaching structure, and that could be big. I frankly don't know a whole lot about their coaches, but I know at least there aren't 4 people trying to be head coach right now in Seoul, which is generally pretty good. So if they can turn those changes into positives instead of flatline, not quite upgrades, they could do extremely well. They could be consistent top 5s. They could be the Seoul Dynasty that we thought Seoul Dynasty were going to be all along. Or they could do what they did last season, which was disappointing. And it would be even more disappointing with what they have. That's my ugly for them, is that they could be just as bad as they were, or worse. Although that's a big asterisk. What do you think?
I actually totally agree. I think I'm very worrisome of this team, and I think it's for the reason you pointed out is they haven't made enough changes. This is a team that vastly underwhelmed us last year, needed to make some changes. Now, getting Fissure is a change, but that's also a risky change. You're rolling the dice on that. For basketball fans, the Houston Rockets picked up Carmelo Anthony at the beginning of this year in an attempt to make a big change to their roster. This kind of classic player. That didn't turn out so good. He's off now. He's off the team, and they've had to make this crazy comeback. I think we could see a similar thing with Seoul, where they made this move in the offseason. They tried to rebuild this team out of what they had, and they get to stage 2, and they're right at 50% or a little bit below, and they make cuts, and something else happens. Or Fissure gets mad and demands a trade, or starts sitting out of scrims. We've seen that in the playoffs. Why couldn't it happen in the regular season too? I'm super worried for this team. I said earlier that I think they're past their prime, and that may have been a little too harsh. I don't know that they necessarily are, but I don't. This team just isn't promising to me. It's not up and coming. There's no arc upward. It's just kind of meh. So, they'll probably get in the playoffs, but it's going to be a rough year, I think. But I'm also hardcore pessimist on this team. So, Darby, maybe you have a different opinion on this. You could correct us a little bit. What do you think?
I don't.
Okay, rip Soul.
I'm just not sold. I feel like maybe I should be, because, Fissure and Jexy, both great pickups. And that's about the only good thing I can really say about Seoul at this point. The rest of it's just very middle of the road for me.
Yeah.
I'm just not buying that what they've done is going to be enough to make it look any different than it did last season.
Funnily enough for me, I'm not going to say I equate them with Washington if we're going to talk power rankings or anything. I think there are certainly divides between Seoul and Washington, though I have Washington much higher than most. I will say the way I equate them is that they have the biggest range, I think, of any team.
Yes.
I think they could be very high, and I think they could be very low. As I said, anywhere between top 5 and top 15, and Washington much the same, not that high. They could enter top 10 perhaps, but they could also be all the way at the bottom if things go really bad. Although they are quite confident, and that was refreshing to see. I talked to them at length about kind of the public perception of the team and everything, and if that's weighing them down, and they don't mind at all. So it's interesting to see if Seoul will kind of rise above what many to consider kind of a meh, as we've said, kind of a meh offseason, and be able to turn their admittedly powerful weapons into something that can actually be utilized effectively. So again, we'll see. I feel that I keep saying that a lot, but really it's just going to come down to game day. Is Fissure going to just show up and sweep the floor like we know him to sometimes do? Or will he do what he did in playoffs and leave the Gladiators with iRemix?
Yeah,
God, I'm still mad about that.
One thing, Brandon, if we learn anything, it's that we shouldn't make predictions against Katrina. We're probably going to be eating our words here in 2 months whenever Fissure and Seoul are just number 1 and killing it.
And I would love that. I think it would be so cool to see the 2 proper overlords of the Overwatch League, the Seoul Dynasty and the Dallas Fuel, duking it out up top while these nobody NYXLs and London Spitfires fight over the scraps with Vancouver and Hangzhou and Shanghai and everything like that. That would be swell. Will that happen?
Who knows?
That's a tall ask, man. I don't know. That'd be
Yikes.
fun. It'd be interesting to see everything shaken up like that. But God, that's a significant shakeup.
Yep. Speaking of a tall ask for a team, next up is the Shanghai Dragons. And I think Darby's going to talk about them a little bit.
Yes, I can talk about the Shanghai Dragons, who, until a couple of days ago, seemed to have a really good offseason. Yeah.
Rip.
Until a couple days ago.
Yeah.
That was my good. I think besides what just happened, which I will get to, it seems like they're a lot more cohesive. Things are looking a lot more positive. Things are transparent, which I think we didn't have for a lot of the Shanghai season. Like, we just didn't know what was going on, and now we're just sort of getting the updates that we need. Every now and then I'll see that Geguri's having a really good time and she's happy, and it warms my heart. I love to see that for her.
Queen.
So yeah, that's my good. My bad, which is as much a strength as it is a weakness, it's just so glaringly obvious they're not the same team, which means they really just don't. It's just predictable. Nobody is going to say, "Oh, we don't need to prepare for Shanghai because they went 0-40." They don't have that underdog story anymore because, I mean, I'm not sold that they're going to be a major contender like a lot of people seem to think they might be. I think they might be top 10. But nobody's expecting them to do as badly as they did last season. They don't have that going for them, so they can't really surprise anyone unless they go 0-28. I guess that could be a surprise.
It's true.
It would be.
Shocker.
Really, it would be.
The real surprise. And the ugly Fearless is gone because this team can't catch a break. So, they've lost their main tank specialist for however long he's going to be gone for. But this also happened so close to the beginning of the season that, I mean, I don't know. I'm not there, but if I had to guess, I'd say they're probably kind of scrambling to work around that right now. And I don't really have faith that right now they exactly know what they're going to do about that. So I think, as much as I hate to say it, the first week will be rough. I don't know how much of stage 1 will be rough. But, yeah.
Yeah.
I will say, so I didn't get to interview Shanghai at this media day thing because, oh my God, they were packed. Because Geguri was there. And because nobody's been able to interview Shanghai before, just because it had been difficult and the team didn't really ever want to be interviewed because they were always losing. So this was mainstream media, as in not ESPN, like their first real chance to sit down and talk with her. And then Youngjin was also there, which was cool. I have no idea how this is going to go. As Darby said, like, there's no way these guys are just like, yeah, cool, okay, move on. Like, they're scrambling. They have no main tank. It's the most important role in the game right now. But someone in chat brought this up, actually, our beat writer for the Shanghai Dragons, who's hanging out in chat. Shanghai could very well just say, don't have a main tank, just don't run comps that use a main tank. Put Geguri on Wrecking Ball, go quad DPS with a Mercy, and just scream. Just see what happens. Go mudding, slick some dirt up there and see if you can get some in your opponent's face. Like, that could work. The Chinese and the Korean people that have been signed for this team that were ex-Condu Panthera are well known for pulling out some crazy compositions and a lot of DPS picks and being very good with that. If they decide, like, lean into the no main tank thing, figure it out, adapt, go crazy. Wildcard strats are super strong in the Overwatch League. Dallas almost beat NYXL in Stage 3 running Reaper May all game long, just putting Taimu on Reaper and Seagull on May. Like, Shanghai could be that team for these first couple weeks. And Darby, you mentioned, like, yeah, everybody's going to prepare for Shanghai. Everybody knows that they're not pushovers anymore. But can you prepare for random quad DPS Wrecking Ball strats? Can you prepare for, I don't know, freaking put Geguri on Torbjorn, triple builder ridiculousness? Like, what if Shanghai just goes nuts with it and decides to have some fun? They could still get some wins, because now, instead of throwing meme comps out there but your team sucks, you could throw meme comps out there but your team is a consistent Korean contenders playoff performance team with one of the best off tanks in the world. That's crazy when you think about it. So yes, losing Fearless is annoying and difficult and something they need to figure out. Like, are you signing someone? Are you making Giguri play main tank? Please don't do that. Like, beyond that, there's still hope. I want to hope for this team.
Yeah.
I'm sure they will figure it out. I just don't think they have.
No, they haven't.
I think they have the most important stage 1 of any team in the Overwatch League for me. And lucky for them, week 2 they play Boston, and week 3 they play Chengdu. Otherwise, their schedule is really hard. And here's why I think this is because if they were to lose every game in stage 1, on top of losing every game last year, the Shanghai effect is well underway again, and teams are going to prepare for them more than they prepare for NYXL almost, And that's horrible. And that's just the reality is no team wants to give Shanghai their first win, especially if it goes a full stage. So I think their best chance is to get a couple wins early, get the, elephant out of the room, get the monkey off their back, whatever, and just get to rolling. And I think you're right, Brandon. I think they're going to have to go meme comps and quad DPS and stuff to just stun on kids out there. I think if they can do that, they'll be fine. But if they go out there and try and just throw someone on Reinhardt in a 3-3 meta and try and play 3-3, like play someone else's game, they're going to get 4-0'd by every team they play. And so I really don't want that to happen. I want Shanghai to win, man. But they need to win against Boston or Chengdu big time.
I think they'll beat Chengdu for sure. I think the main tank mismatch coming up against either Gamsu or Axiom or Fusions in Boston is going to be rough. But even so, also potential, depending on how crappily Boston are doing. I think you brought up a good point that I'm now forgetting. Oh, crap. Oh, yeah. The Dragons effect compounded. Every team right now is having the talk of like, look, if we give Shanghai their first win, don't take it too hard because now they're looking like a pretty good team. If they go 0-47, then you're right. It's right back to where it was. And everybody's like, no, they still suck. Now it's still going. You still can't give them their first win. Oh, God, please. Prep. Yep. And then, it could be really bad, assuming that there aren't any like other Shanghai level teams, other season 1 Shanghai level teams that are losing every game. Like if Florida is just an absolute nuclear wasteland, then, so be it. You can get your 1 win off of Florida, like Florida got their 1 wins off of Shanghai. So we'll see there. But I want to hope for Shanghai. They should be able to pull something out.
I agree. On the other end of the spectrum, as far as I think reliability going into the game of the season, is Vancouver Titans, our last team. Former Runaway, all moved over here. You add in one player whose name I'm totally lost on right now, and then Harsha. And you've got this team. So they've got a ton of former synergy. Overall, I think top to bottom, you can't say enough about how solid this roster is. So that is by far the good. This is a team that should perform coming out of the gate, maybe more than the other expansion teams will because they have the former synergy. All that should be fine, good to go. So of all the expansion teams, of all the teams that rebuilt, I could see Vancouver having the hottest start of all those teams. The only bad, to play devil's advocate to that, is that they don't have any Overwatch League experience. They have no experience on stage outside of, I guess, community countdown meme stuff, I guess. And then they have no Western experience, kind of in the same light. Whether those will be big factors or not, I mean, they've played LANs in Korea. They've played really intense LANs in that final versus Kongdu Pandera. So they know how to play in clutch situations on stage, which I think is really the essence of being an Overwatch League kind of, experienced player. So I think they'll be fine, but that would be a bad if I had one. And the other bad one I would say, I just kind of remember this, is the visa issues they kind of had getting over here. They have not had near as much time in LA as the other teams have, especially the season 1 teams. So I have no doubt that they've been practicing and have had time to scrim together and those sorts of things. But as far as getting settled, there's something to be said about culture shock, moving from Korea to Los Angeles, I'm sure. So we have to think of those kinds of things when evaluating these players. That could be a hindrance to slow them down in stage 1. I don't know, though. And the ugly for me is, all right, guys. I love the logo. I'm a big fan, actually, of the Toronto color or Vancouver colors and logo, but not using the runaway pink and having to give up that brand. I'm sure there was issues with getting the brand. There was no way they were going to get it with Flowervin and Runner being in Korea still. But yeah, it sucks. This is like we loved them for their pink sweatshirts, and now we have to get used to them in the green and blue. Just kind of feels weird, man. So that's just like the ugly for me. Just kind of meh. But yeah, oh well, they'll be fine.
I'll throw out our Vancouver Titans beat writer, Shy Guy OW, is over here in chat, fact checking us and everything. Rappel
Yes.
from Element Mystic was the other player that was signed off of Element Mystic, obviously. And then Hureg technically is an Overwatch League veteran, having played with the London Spitfire after playing with GC Busan Wave in Korean Contenders. So at the very least, they have that. And as you mentioned, I think it's super key to remember that Korean Contenders is on LAN, was on LAN, is probably not going to be anymore.
Yeah.
And this team played the most intense LAN game of Overwatch that has ever been played. This team. An 8-game series that started at 11 p.m. my time and finished at 5 a.m. my time. These guys know LAN stamina. The only team that has more at this point, probably the London Spitfire.
Yeah.
Not even NYXL really can compete, despite their extensive experience last season, really. I don't think they've had as many high-pressure situations as London and now Vancouver have had. So that's really good. I'll mention that Uber said that he was looking out for the Titans specifically because this is the closest we will ever get to a direct Contenders team show matching an Overwatch League team. This is just right now, with, like you said, without their practice against Overwatch League teams or with a very minimal amount of practice against Overwatch League teams. This is just a Contenders team right now. Arguably the best Contenders team that has ever existed, besides maybe Fusion Uni, but still just a Contenders team.
Oh.
That will either be really good because they'll have tons of crazy wildcard stuff and surprise people, or really bad because they will have no scrim knowledge and get swept for the first couple weeks while they figure that out. I'm more inclined for the first one, but
yeah.
I'm not overly worried about the Titans. Like you said, I don't know. I'm kind of leaning towards the first as well, Brennan. Honestly, what you said about their visa issues was the one thing I was most worried about for them right now, because I've moved from one country to the other. It takes some time to adjust to that, and if you're compounding that with diving right into the league, that's going to be rough. That's the one thing I have to worry about with the Titans for right now.
Yeah, player health issues will be something to keep an eye on them for sure. Making sure they're taken care of between that first, stage 1 and stage 2, between those two stages. They'll probably really need a break to be let's learn California, let's learn LA, let's just relax and chill,
But look who they've got on staff to help with that. Harsha is there. Harsha is a great guy and he knows his stuff.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
He was a strong developmental force for San Francisco. He understands the area very well at this point. He will be that guy for the Titans right now. And I think their signing Harsha was twofold. It was, this guy is a good coach in and of itself. He's got Overwatch League experience, and he's going to be able to support these guys from a developmental capacity as well. So at least they've got that. The staff pickups they've made were minimal. They kept most of their coaches and staff from the OG Runaway. But the ones they made were pretty smart.
Totally agree. All right, guys. Well, I think that rounds out our teams. I think we did it. We made the sprint.
So what happens now?
Well, with our time we have left, we have a kind of arbitrary end time and an arbitrary, because this is, it's like whose line is it anyway? All the rules are made up, points don't matter, kind of thing. So we thought we'd each give one week 1 prediction. Week 1 of the Overwatch League starts Thursday, February 14th on Valentine's Day, 6 p.m. Central. That's been on my calendar for I don't know, a year or 20 years. Since the beginning of time, it's been on my calendar. So
it's all fuzzy.
Yeah, it all blends together. But I'm super stoked. So we have to make our predictions for the first week of the Overwatch League. Not full predictions, because that would probably take another hour. but one bold prediction each of us have for this first week. It doesn't, I guess maybe it doesn't have to be bold, just one game that maybe you're sure about, you think is interesting to talk about, something there. Darby, because you had your notes in the Google Doc first, I will let you start this first.
Sure. Well, I know the big week 1 top tier matchup everyone's talking about, Fusion versus Spitfire. That's not the one I'm going to talk about. I want to talk about the Shock versus Gladiators. I'd say also fairly top tier.
Yeah.
Not as interesting because it's not the finals rematch. So, like I said, Shock's got this big old roster. Gladiators probably have a better idea than I do of what that's going to look like on stage. But I think right now they're one of the more unpredictable returning teams. I think the whole smorgasbord of players they do have is, for the most part, really, really good. And I think they've got a solid coaching staff. So I think that gives them the edge. I don't know how bold it is to say they'll beat the Gladiators, but that's what I think.
That's fair enough. That's a super interesting matchup to watch. That's the end of the week. It's like a prime time Sunday game to really keep an eye on. So totally agree there. I'll go next here. So I decided to go for softball, just hit the easy one, and I'm gonna say the Fusion are going to beat the Spitfire. The opening match, the defending champs are going to lose in the Blizzard Arena to the Philadelphia Fusion. One, because I have my doubts about London personally. Not that I think they're the most mechanically skilled team in the entire league, have probably the highest ceiling in the entire league. I just don't know that it's going to be there this season. And I see Philly really having it. All their issues from last season, I would think, are going to be resolved. And if any, Philly just kind of seems to exemplify this nature of a team that loses in the championship and is going to come back hungrier than ever, wanting to get that win more than anything in the world this first game. I don't see London really caring that much. Obviously they care. They're not going to sandbag or anything, but Philly is going to want this win. And there's really something to be said about that determination. When you're in map 2 or map 3, I think the Fusion are going to have more grit. This is really, top level analysis stuff right here. They're going to have the grit that's going to, I think, really push them to win this game. So I think it'll be a shocker of an opener. I hope I'm right because I would love to see it. I'll be really bummed if it's a 4-0 for London. So let's hope that doesn't happen. That's all I'll say. Brandon, what about you?
Very interesting take. But I think I agree on the Philly. Both teams want it, but Philly might want it just a little bit more. That you think you know us commercial. Oh man.
Oh,
I was all about it, dude. That was
so good.
Just so good. All right. You guys want a bold take? I have yet to hear a bold take from either of you right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to pull one up. I'm going to throw this out there. I'm going to make some people mad. I'm going to make some people laugh because they're not going to believe it. The Washington Justice are going to win their first game against NYXL. You knew it? You saw that game?
I knew it. I knew you were going to say it.
I just want to believe, man. Okay? I want to believe. And here's the deal. I'm going to go into why, of course. I'm not just going to throw out that they have more grit or they want it more or whatever.
Okay.
Here's the deal. You have a team who transferred a starting main tank and one of the major coaches from your opponent who know the ins and outs of this team. You have a team that is pretty universally underestimated. A team that, despite that underestimation, is maintaining its confidence and preparing for every game like it can win. You have a team with a solid management structure, a head coach with, as Uber put it, a horde of analyst minions, and just a team in general that knows it's an underdog and is walking around with that sort of energy in mind. That is a team that can upset NYXL. I'm calling it right now.
Man.
Might be a 3-2. Might be awful, awful close. But I think they could really, really surprise some people. And that would completely change everyone's perception of them in an instant.
Absolutely.
Because I know plenty of people, I think you included, Connor, who were thinking that they're going to go 0-7 in this stage. And I do not think that will happen. it would be it would make my old American loving K Kona spamming heart real happy if we could see Washington stick it to what might end up being quite an intense rivalry if we're looking at personnel in week 1. So that's my prediction.
Man, the narrative-driven side of me wants that more than anything in the world. You have no idea. So I will be rooting for the Justice in that game because of this prediction. So you've earned my fanhood for that one game. But I am doing it skeptically, so I'll say that much.
I'll take it. Yeah, no, I know I wouldn't necessarily like convince anyone with that, but it's just what I'm going with.
I like it. I do. Well, that was a sprint, guys. We did it. That's all I was gonna say. That was a sprint. That's all I had in the tank. That's all I had left. That was a sprint.
Yeah. It was a lot.
It was.
But well worth it. Okay. So I think that'll be it from us. And I think next Monday, the 18th, oh God. Oh man. Oh, there's a lot that's gonna happen between now and then. Oh dear. We will go over as many of the games that are interesting to go over. Talk about some interesting performers and stuff. Maybe I'll work on an interview. I don't know if people will really be chomping at the bit for that. Like Overwatch League players, I mean, after going through a grueling first week or whatever. But if I can grab somebody, I'd like to. I'll be down at the arena. So, maybe I'll just like bump some elbows until I get what I want. But overall, it should be a really interesting episode where we can finally talk about real actual like footage and knowledge and understanding of a game as opposed to just speculating after literally everything has changed. Even though it's still not going to be a ton, and we're still going to have to we're going to have to wait till week 2 to really know, or till the end of the stage or whatever, but at least we'll have something. Yeah. So that'll be super exciting, and you guys won't want to miss it. All you people out there watching us right now. There are literally dozens of you. So come back this time next week, Monday at 6 PST, 9 EST, etc. And we will keep giving you that delicious Overwatch goodness that you all crave. Thanks very much to Darby for joining us, our beat writer for the Hangzhou Spark, who did an amazing job outlining some crazy awesome teams that we'll be seeing. Keep an eye on her posts, and for her to help me with transcribing interviews, because, oh my God, there's a lot. She's been doing amazing so far, as most of our beat writer crew have been doing. So, yeah.
Team, we've been like the Israelites going through the wilderness of the offseason for many years. It feels like, anyway. It's only been like months.
Need more mana.
So now we've made it. We've made it to the promised land. We're here. We'll see you all on the other side after this first week of games. We love you all, and we will see you later. This has been WatchHaus.